Messer Fencing channel. My name is Oskar and today we'll be talking about the Wincker. So we're back with the Hauptstück series of videos where we'll be looking at some of the principal plays or Hauptstücke in Johannes Leküchner's Kunst und Zettel im Messer. And the sixth Hauptstück is the so-called Wincker. This is the last of the Verborgenhaue. After this there's going to be a couple of different types of Hauptstücke. But this is a very interesting one because this particular Hauptstück does not exist in the Lichtenauer tradition for longsword, making it very interesting indeed. So as per usual, I'll be going over why it is included in the manuscript, which is a very relevant question in this case. I'll be looking at what is there play-wise, and finally I'll be giving a couple of very technical pointers that might help you perform this particular play a bit more easily. So as to the question, why is it there? Well, it's not included in the longsword sections of a lot of the Lichtenauer manuscripts, but it is included with Leküchner's Messer. It does have a longsword equivalent though, and it is called the Sturzhau, which can be found in Talhofer among others. Now, its stated purpose is to help you deal with the so-called Freifechter. And whether this refers to the people of the guild of the same name that existed at a later point in history, or just a generic archetype of fencer, is not fully sure. But that's also not the most relevant thing, because the behavior that these Freifechter display in fencing is described quite accurately in Leküchner's work himself. He describes them as people who parry widely, so that could mean people who fence with a really big parry riposte type of game, as you can see here. So against these types of fencers, trying to wind is not a very good idea because you would have big problems getting the point on line in the first place. So how do you deal with that other than just trying to play their game? Well, that's where the Wincker comes in. The Wincker allows you to circumvent those really big parries and keep up the pressure on these types of Freifechter. And it allows you to circumvent their parries and eventually get back into the winding game, which at this point you should already be somewhat familiar with if you're working in the manuscript. So basically that is its function. It allows you to strike around really wide parries. Now, if we have a look at what types of plays are there, we start off with the very simple Wincker itself. It's a strike where you hit with a short edge around a big parry. And in the same play, you're allowed to continue to this other side as well, performing pretty much the same thing again. So, short edge strike to the head. Interestingly, the manuscript also mentions that you should be able to perform these techniques from both sides. So, both from right and from left. The second type of play is pretty much the same setup, so once again strike a Wincker from the right, do the same thing from the left, but then we bring it into a wind. And this allows us to, for instance, turn a Wincker into a thrust. The final part of this Hauptstück actually shows us what to do when we do a Wincker against someone who has a different type of parry. So, you know, like a bow or a crooked parry, which is something that is described in the manuscript later on. But it basically means that someone performs what's called a hanging parry in some other traditions, where the handle is high, the blade slopes downward. So the Wincker also works against those. So that's the final type of play that we see in this Hauptstück. Now when it comes to how to do the Wincker, that's actually, there's a very nice trick to help you doing it. Wincker means the waver. So what you do is basically make a waving motion with your hand. It's like, imagine that you have a messer on your right shoulder, just for now, just use your hand, and try and punch it forward, as if you're making a strike. Now, before connecting with anything, basically imagine that you see a friend walking across the street from you, so you try to wave to them. And that's basically how you do a Wincker. So here, let me try this with this blade. shoulder, striking forward, and now wave to the other side of the street. And that's how we have our Wincker. Now, doing the Wincker to both sides requires you to drop the point and bring it in on the other side like this. Same if you start from left, bum, bum. Having short combinations. Now this is important to realize with the Wincker, that you bring your hands high enough to go around the parry that you're getting. Now another thing to keep in mind is that a really important part of this Hauptstück is the second set of plays, where you turn a double Wincker into a winding. Because if you are fencing an opponent who is doing this parrying and riposting game, at some point you're going to be facing the riposte coming your way. So your first Wincker might very well fool your opponent, allowing you to either hit or strike to the other side if they parry that. But after the second Wincker, they're probably going to be wise to your tricks, and they're going to be striking to you again. Meaning that if that happens, you have to be ready. So after the second Wincker, as you can see here, you should be getting your long edge back in again to make sure that you are covered and can then work with the winding game, probably getting a thrust or a duplicatum or any other type of winding action. And that is the second very important thing to learn about the Wincker. This allows the Wincker to become once again part of this overall system that we're learning about. So rather than just fire and forget single type of trick that might get you one or two hits in against the parry riposte type of opponent, it allows you to bring those people and force them to play your game, making this a very potent Hauptstück overall. So, just to recap, we've had a look at why the Wincker is there. It's very important for messer fencers if you get to train with other fencing systems. It allows you to deal with parrying and riposting fencers. Secondly, we've gone over the couple of plays that there are. We found that the second set of plays where you turn the Wincker into winding is very important. And finally, some very practical tips, meaning that you tend to strike around by waving and making sure that turning this into a winding comes in time to make sure that you are safe from any of those ripostes that you might be getting. Anyway, I hope you liked this video. If so, let me know in the comments. Leave a like, of course, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already, and press the bell button to get notifications. Stay safe, keep fencing, and I'll catch you in the next one.